And I think it's really important for us to be part of the conversations around open source, open infrastructure and open source software. Many of us in our community are users of open source software, but I know there are a lot of challenges for those communities, especially around sustainability and so on. And so this session will focus on some of those challenges around maintaining open source software and how open source communities work and how they adopt new functionalities and so on. And so our first speaker today is Heather Greer Klein, and Heather is from the Samvera community. And Samvera is an open source software for repositories. I don't think it's widely used here in Latin America, but certainly in the United States in particular, there's a growing community of Samvera users. And so I'd very much like to welcome Heather to the podium, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks, everyone. I know that our group stands between us and our evening meal, so I promise that this will be short. And even though I'm talking about challenges, I think it's important to talk about challenges. And so Kathleen asked me to come here to speak about open source communities from the perspective of a community manager. And if that term doesn't resonate, I'm going to start out by just defining a few terms so you know where I'm coming from with this perspective. I only have one slide about how open source repositories are important because I hope we all have a sense of that, but it's important to ground ourselves before we talk about problems. I'll share what I think are some of the major challenges in open source right now, based on my experience in Samvera, but I will tell you that I worked with the DSpace community for 2 years in 2019 and 2020. So I'm familiar with that community as well. I think these challenges are systemic. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some short-term and longer-term solutions that we're talking about and thinking about in the Samvera community that I think will apply to other communities as well. So just to define a few things. So as a reminder, open source at its most basic definition is it's a type of software license. It makes software freely available to use and modify and enhance. In our scientific and cultural heritage ecosystems, open source projects can provide the digital infrastructure that we need to do our work. It's software built in the open, and it is built and supported by its community of users. But separate from open source repository software is the open source repository community. This is the people who are installing, running, using the software for their repository. It's the people who develop and maintain those systems and who develop and maintain the community code that underlies all of those systems. It's also the people who make decisions about the software. We have to make a lot of decisions when it comes to software in the open source world. And community is the way that we get that done. And nearly everyone in most communities are volunteers. For the Samvera community, I'm the only staff member. I'm the only person whose entire job is looking after the community. Everyone else who's participating has an entire full other job and institution. So it becomes part of our challenges when we're thinking about managing that really precious energy. So an open source repository community manager, I coordinate and support collaboration for all of those people who make up the community. So that's the people who use and develop, but also the people who are interested who might adapt the software. So some things I don't do as a community manager. I don't use the software. I don't run a repository. I don't develop or maintain. I'm not a software developer. I don't make decisions about any of our software platforms, but I encourage and organize and support all of the people who do that work and try to help make them be efficient and work together well. I also want to talk about the open source service provider relationship. Service providers are a critically important part of every open source community, but I want to take a moment to differentiate the relationship of an institution that has a service provider relationship from an institution's relationship with a community. So if you have a relationship with a service provider, you have a contract. And that contract clearly defines the work to be produced. This can be customized to fit your use case. You can make certain that the work that's done for you is done to a certain timeline and for a certain cost. And all those things are outlined in a contract. The community relationship. Community is a collective effort. The timeline for getting things done is based on volunteer availability. The work produced is collectively defined. It's not going to fit a specific use case for every institution, but it's looking to what are the things that we all need? What is the shared basis we need to cover? The costs are staff time, contributions to support developers, and dues that you pay. But those dues don't go, at least in the Samvera community, not $1 goes to development. It all goes to the infrastructure of maintaining the community. So Samvera, just quickly, Samvera is a community. You can't install Samvera. It's people. You install the software that those people maintain. So we have several software platforms. They are all designed for different use cases. They work together. A lot of them are built on shared components. It's just the approach that we take. So Samvera is sort of an umbrella under which all of these platforms live. So why use open source repositories? I know Michele will speak about this as well. So it's infrastructure that reflects our shared needs and our shared values. Repositories are a critical part of our infrastructure. At its best, it can be infrastructure that reflects our values. It has design that upholds transparency and equity. It can bring efficiency, reduce the duplication of our efforts, create systems that meet our needs, and that can be customized to meet really specific needs. It's community managed. It ensures our systems meet our requirements for things like accessibility, interoperability, participating in all of the wonderful things that Core does. This infrastructure responds to our ecosystem. It doesn't respond to corporate shareholders. So I'm going to share some challenges I see from my perspective. I focus really on the day-to-day of this collective work. I have examples specific from the Samvera community, but as I said, they'll apply to others as well. So I see our major challenges as a vicious cycle that's sapping energy and making it harder for us to reach our full potential for this infrastructure and to respond well to community needs. And these problems, they compound each other. So I'm going to focus on the first two. We have fewer developers in the community, and we have an equitable labor distribution. So our collective development capacity is shrinking. And by this, I mean we have fewer and fewer individuals at our institutions who can do the work of creating and maintaining software code. This work is highly skilled, it's highly paid, and we're competing with industry. And we're not only competing on wages, we're also competing on offering the support that is standard in the software industry, things like product managers, quality testers, large teams of developers. The largest development teams in our ecosystem for Samvera are at very well-resourced institutions And those institutions have a mission to work on innovative infrastructure. That is a critical part of what we do. But their mission is not maintaining existing open source software. The mission of their institution is to develop what comes next. And we need what comes next. But we also need to maintain what we have and what we're all using and the versions that we're on and moving to other versions and all of those things. Community code is difficult. It can be hard to remember for those of us who aren't software designers, but community-built code has unique challenges. It's been built by many people over time. It is much more difficult to work with than something built from scratch. Everyone developing from institution deals with the tension between development and focus on their local institution, their local repository, and then also contributing to that shared community code. And as our teams shrink at our institutions, the demands on our developers' time are high. And if community contribution is just a little tiny part of their duties, it is always going to come last. So also technical leadership is high pressure. By technical leadership, I mean the work of organizing, planning, reviewing, and keeping development moving forward in a timely manner. So in the Samvera community, we have technical leads and product owners for each of our components. They're all volunteers. They all have roles at other institutions. The wider community gives them a lot of responsibility to meet our collective needs, but they have very low authority. They can only persuade others to contribute their work. They have no actual control over who's available, when, for how long, or who can do what tasks. That is a high stress position. Also, maintaining code is a specific skill set. Not everyone who can write software can maintain community code. And not everyone is interested in maintaining community code. So in my community and others, we end up relying heavily on individuals or institutions who are our most passionate, our most invested, and this is not sustainable. Individuals and institutions could start feeling taken advantage of if that work is not equally distributed. Our most passionate colleagues can feel burnt out and have to step away for a long period of time, and that really reduces our efficiency. Also, if someone leaves the community, if they change jobs, the whole community can face a setback because too much work was resting on one pair of shoulders. So this is just an article. This problem is part of the wider open source ecosystem. It is not just specific to the open source that we talk about, but the open source that runs the internet. So this is an article, what does an open source maintainer do after burnout? Maintaining an open source project is far different from coding, which is the problem if coding is what you love. So this is known in the wider community as well. So these things lead to slow software releases and a loss of trust and a loss of investment. Slow software releases. As I know you know, big changes can take far too long. There can be an assumption sometimes that if there's a large community of folks who are working on code, that sort of everyone else is working. But maybe everyone else also has local priorities. Maybe things have sort of wound down, and if no one's paying attention or if no one has capacity, then that work just kind of sits. There's a lot of invisible labor to the organizing, reviewing, and testing and helping others that goes into keeping this kind of maintenance work going. And time pressure can lead to quick decisions. And sometimes that means that those decisions are not as transparent as we want them to be. So these are all the sorts of things that can lead us to slow software releases, which in the Samvera community, we've had a piece of really critical underlying infrastructure that we've been working to implement for years. And we're this close, and we're having to do so much to get ourselves over that line. So when we have slow software releases, we fall behind. We could get to a point where when the thing we've been working on is finally done, it's already time for the next thing, but we have to stop and focus on migration, and then we fall even further behind. But the longer things drag on, the harder estimates are. Estimates are already incredibly difficult with community code. They only get more difficult. In software development, they speak a lot about context switching. So when you switch between working on different kinds of projects, you lose a lot of time. So all of these things hurt us as a community and as local implementers. And so this leads to a loss of trust and further investment, the things that we need to address these very problems. When we overpromise and underdeliver, we lose the trust of our implementers. And people who may be perfect implementers for your software, they also say, well, what's this thing? You've been working on it forever, or maybe I should use something different. And when we burn out our most passionate colleagues, and when we rely too heavily on a handful of institutions, they're left hurt. And so we hurt the people who helped us the most. So trust suffers and the resources continue to shrink, and the cycle just continues. So after all of those sad stories, some potential solutions. Yes, I said to Kathleen, can I really lay out the problems? So some short-term solutions, some things we're trying in Canberra. We're doing something called maintenance pledges. Basically, this just means that institutions are letting us know ahead of time who's available to do the work and when, so that we can do all of that work ahead of time to prepare for them so they can be the most efficient. When we did this last year, it doubled our code contributions, and it was the equivalent to almost 2 full-time developers. So paying institutions for staff time for technical leadership, this is also something we're trying. Not actually sustainable because it costs us a little more than our revenue. We're dipping into savings a little bit, but we're reimbursing an institution so that one of our technical leads can be half-time on Canberra. And we found that anything less than half-time is not going to work. So grants are a great short-term solution. When we get a grant in our ecosystem, it's like we temporarily have staff. We have a grant right now in our Haiku platform, wonderful grant, doing wonderful things, making Haiku work for consortia so that consortia can act as a service provider and offer Haiku to all of their members. So lots of activity happening there, but I have to spend time thinking, when that grant is over, how are we going to maintain our momentum? So service providers are filling that development gap. They are critical right now. They are the only option for many institutions to use open source at all. And for many institutions, it's their only way to support community technical work. Some folks who work on our Haiku platform, in the course of 10 days, decided they wanted to raise $50,000 to put towards contractors, because we were going to have a 3-month gap where no one was working on a really important piece of our infrastructure. So they raised that money so we don't lose that time. But that money all came from very under-resourced institutions who have no developers. So the only way that they could contribute is by working with a service provider. So I don't see that changing. So we have to think about how to make sure that we have a healthy ecosystem of service providers. That can bring some efficiency and some predictability. But I want to make sure you know that working with a service provider for community code, there's no guarantee that they will get X thing done for Y cost, because it's still community code. There's all kinds of surprises that they come across as they do their work. So again, estimates are hard. Long-term solutions we're working on. Since I started, I'm the first community manager for Samvera, and I started in October of 2020. I've worked really hard to eliminate every barrier to participation in the community. So making things very easy as possible, both technically and contributing to our working groups. We've got a strong structure, support for community participation. And it's very important that we're always looking to make sure that our underlying technologies are flexible, that they're using industry standard code and things that are expected. So if a junior developer who has never worked in our ecosystem before, if it takes them a month or more to get up to date on our code base, that's really hard. We want to make it as easy as possible for someone new to get started because they're using a technology that's familiar to them. We talk a lot about a consortial staffing model. So we'd like to have dedicated technical leadership staff that rotates between institutions, half-time to full-time work spent on community work. We're looking at how we could possibly do this. I think it is one good potential model. Another is, of course, centralized staffing. For Samvera to have a full-time technical coordinator would be the technical mirror to myself. We'd have to double the amount of money that we bring in every year. It's a very expensive position. Something that we really want to do. We have to figure out how to do it. And we'd like to see further regular assignment of community code work to development staff at institutions. Just make it part of everyone's job as much as possible and not something they're volunteering to do on top of their job. That's not fair. So I think through these models, we could regain some efficiency, some stability. We could provide people with the support that they deserve for the hard work that they do for us and end this cycle. And then we could start to be proactive for maintenance and innovation and not always feeling like we're trying to play catch up. So whatever long-term solutions we come up with, I think it's going to require, of course, increased and sustained financial investment, which is what we're all trying to find. That's all from me. Thank you.